Currently, around 45% of households are experiencing a shortfall between their local housing allowance and the rent they are required to pay. Did you know that over 95% of our viewers aren't subscribed to the channel? We totally get it. Life gets busy, and sometimes it's easy to forget. But here's the thing. Subscribing is completely free, and it really helps us keep creating the content you enjoy. So, why not hit that subscribe button and join our community? It only takes a second, but it makes a world of difference to us. Thank you for your support. Some local councils are covering this gap, which collectively costs them approximately £204 million. But when the Public Accounts Committee carried out a review back in January, DWP officials couldn't provide clarity on how freezing the local housing allowance would impact homelessness, even though it's clear it must have some effect. Well, I would hope that since then, they've provided you with a letter or further supporting information. If that hasn't happened, I will ensure that it does following this session. In terms of homelessness, this is being led by the Deputy Prime Minister, as one of the key priorities I've assigned to her. We've allocated a significant amount, £950 million, directly to local authorities, aimed at increasing the availability of temporary accommodation. Often, the shortage of temporary accommodation is a major contributor to homelessness. Altogether, we are investing £1 billion to address this issue, with much of that focused on prevention. So, there is indeed a strong emphasis on tackling homelessness, with a particular focus on supporting councils through better access to temporary housing. Let me remain on the topic of homelessness briefly. We've identified that the cladding remediation levy has absorbed a large portion of developers' funds. As a result, the number of affordable housing starts in London, already low, dropped by 90% last year. That certainly doesn't support those facing homelessness or help in combating poverty, does it? No, you're absolutely right. That's an issue we've recognized and are actively addressing. Of course, the necessary cladding work must be funded, but equally, we need to reverse that drop in affordable housing numbers. That is something the Deputy Prime Minister is fully engaged with, alongside our broader housing efforts. One of the most troubling findings from our inquiry was that, as of June 24th, nearly 6,000 households with children were being placed in bed and breakfast accommodation. Alarmingly, almost 4,000 of those exceeded the 6-week legal limit. Prime Minister, I ask you to imagine what it's like for a family with children living in B&Bs, having to leave by 9 a.m. and not returning until 6 p.m. It must be incredibly difficult. Additionally, we discovered that 39,000 households were being placed in temporary accommodation outside their usual local areas. These families are enduring extended stays in unsuitable B&Bs, far from their communities, schools and workplaces, which only increases their hardship. So, Prime Minister, what do you propose can realistically be done to start solving this crisis? First, let me acknowledge the seriousness of this issue. It significantly affects families, not only the physical strain of living in cramped and inadequate spaces, but also the long-term developmental impact on children. For instance, many children in such situations struggle with homework and fall behind at school. These difficulties don't just affect them now, they persist and accumulate over time. That's why we've committed extra funding to local authorities to increase the availability of temporary accommodation. While this won't be resolved overnight, I fully understand the urgency, and you're right to highlight it. Thank you. Just to continue on that, every homeless child is potentially missing school, missing access to breakfast clubs your government supports, and missing hospital appointments due to lack of a stable home. Councils are buckling under the financial strain of temporary accommodation, some even declaring bankruptcy. This situation isn't sustainable. So, Prime Minister, do you agree that there is an urgent need to reset local government funding to help address these long-term pressures? Yes, I do. First, let me reiterate that we've put a full £1 billion into tackling homelessness, a substantial amount, the most in years. This is in response to the challenges this committee has rightly raised. The funding has been included in the budget and the spending review, showing a clear commitment to tackling homelessness. On the broader topic of local authority funding, yes, I believe it requires a comprehensive review. In fact, I've believed this for some time. One issue is the lack of multi-year settlements. Many councils have told me that because funding is allocated year by year, they struggle to make effective long-term plans. Additionally, countless councils have said that unless we address issues like no-fault evictions, which we are doing, the homelessness burden will only grow, with local authorities left to pick up the costs. That's precisely why we've brought in new measures to end no-fault evictions. So yes, I agree. It needs reviewing. Change is already underway, and those issues are among our highest priorities for swift action. Good to hear. But when can we expect to see those changes taking effect and that investment making a difference? The investment is already being delivered. We're actively directing the funding where it's needed most. The financial and political commitment is fully in place, and the Deputy Prime Minister is overseeing this very closely. She's fully dedicated to the cause, as am I. Earlier, you spoke about your vision for 3 years from now. But when will we see concrete improvements on the ground, specifically in homelessness and temporary housing? I want the additional funding for temporary accommodation to have an immediate impact, meaning more accommodation available now. Of course, it takes time to implement fully, but this isn't a project with distant timelines. We're focused on identifying what can be built, repurposed, or taken on by councils quickly. I want this change to happen as swiftly as possible. We've no intention of dragging this out any longer than necessary. Yet we have a situation where the Home Office is competing with councils to rent the same properties, driving up prices and increasing pressure on public funds. It's infuriating that the last government left tens of thousands of asylum seekers unprocessed, requiring taxpayer-funded accommodation. So, are you planning to build homes or use existing ones? We must do a combination of both. Building is essential, but that takes time. Meanwhile, we're repurposing available housing, and we're working to reduce the asylum backlog. That's a major focus. But could you specify what kind of housing you're planning to repurpose for temporary accommodation? There are numerous properties across local authorities that could be suitable, and we're actively identifying where that is possible. Could you share specific examples? Not at the moment, but I'll follow up with a detailed written response. Many local authorities around this table say there's very little spare housing. If there were, they'd have already used it. Exactly. Which is why the issue of thousands of asylum seekers being left in limbo without processed claims is such a major burden. So you won't be placing homeless families into the same hotels then? No. We're looking at all available accommodation, and I'll ensure a detailed letter is sent to clarify. All right, we'll be eagerly awaiting that response. Councils across the country will be holding their breath.